The elevator ride to the 39th floor felt longer than usual. I stood alone, gripping a slim manila envelope and the small black notebook that had never left my desk drawer in 12 years. The soft hum of the elevator masked the sound of my heart pounding. Not with fear, but with finality. This was no longer a decision, it was the beginning of something I had planned for far too long. When the door slid open, I stepped into the executive wing of Betrayal. Systems, glass walls, polished concrete and air that always smelled faintly of cedar and money. Landon Crane's office was at the far end corner view. Of course, he didn't look up as I entered. He was scrolling through something on his tablet, espresso steaming beside him. Marin, he said without warmth. What's on fire this morning? I said nothing. I walked up to his desk and placed the envelope down in front of him. He raised an eyebrow, then picked it up, tearing it open with one fluid motion. His eyes scanned the letter, and after a few seconds he chuckled. Then he laughed loudly. You're serious? You're actually quitting? He leaned back in his chair, grinning. At your age, in this industry, good luck. His laughter echoed off the glass walls. His espresso mug rattled slightly as he tapped the table. Honestly, I thought you were a lifer, quiet, reliable, like an old Swiss Army knife. Not exactly CTO material though. Right outside his office, I could see his assistant glance toward the glass. Landon raised his voice just enough. Hey, Jenna, quitting, should we let her keep her stapler as a parting gift? I said nothing. He waved dismissively. 12 years of support work is impressive. But let's be real, innovation that takes vision, that takes guts. I looked at him, calm, controlled. There's a second document in the envelope. His grin faltered. He pulled it out, flipping it over. It was a printed policy document, Section 7.3, Employee Created Development Archives and IP Ownership, highlighted in yellow at the bottom. His digital signature. March 4, 2020. You signed that 3 years ago, I said, right before the compliance audit. He blinked, lips tightening. That's not meant for senior engineers. I picked up my notebook and turned to leave. You just called me support staff, I said, pausing at the door. In 3 weeks you'll wish I had stayed. The elevator opened again, and this time I smiled. He laughed like it was nothing, but what stayed with me longer than his arrogance was the echo of something worse. I used to believe in that man. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I sat in my car on the 3rd floor of the parking garage. Engine off, windows cracked. The manila envelope rested on the passenger seat, but my hand reached for the old black notebook in my bag. I hadn't opened it in years. On the very first page, written in neat handwriting, was the line, offer received, MIT PhD Engineering Systems, full fellowship, decision due March 15. 6 years ago I had been offered a fully funded doctoral position at MIT, a place I'd dreamed of since undergrad. I had printed out the offer letter and taped it to my fridge. At the time it felt like I had finally made it. Then I told Landon. He called me into his office within hours. At that point he was still vice president of innovation. Slick, charming, a little too polished but always convincing. I remember sitting across from him as he spun his version of reality. MIT is great, he said, but you're already shaping the future here. You're not a student, Marin, you're a leader. I tried to stay neutral, but he kept going. If you stay, I'll make sure you're chief engineer within 12 months, you'll lead every core project. Your name will be on patents, models, internal credits, everything. No ivory towers. Just real-world impact. I hadn't realized how much I wanted that until he said it out loud. To be seen, to be trusted, to finally be visible. I turned MIT down the next week. I believed I was choosing relevance over reputation, that I was trading titles for influence, and for a little while it even seemed like I'd made the right call. I led the design of Betrayal's predictive energy routing systems and created a dynamic optimization model that became the backbone of the company's platform. I remember one specific night, the system kept failing under peak load. Everyone else had gone home, but I stayed. I finally found the flaw around 2:12 a.m. I slept in the break room using my hoodie as a pillow, just to push the fix before the 6 a.m. system update. I didn't need applause, but I believed recognition would come. It never did, and then came the moment that finally broke that belief. 2 months before I handed in my resignation, Betrayal hosted a virtual round with press analysts and investors. I wasn't presenting, just running background technical checks, but I stayed logged in out of habit. The moderator introduced the final speaker, Landon Crane, his topic the evolution of predictive energy routing. I braced myself for marketing fluff, but nothing prepared me for what he said next. I personally developed the breakthrough routing model over the course of 3 intense years. He said it was the turning point for our entire optimization strategy. My chest tightened. There was no hesitation in his voice, no qualification. Just full, unshakable confidence in a lie. I stared at the screen. That model had taken me 18 months of testing, Failing, revising, and rebuilding, I had built every part of it line by line, simulation by simulation. One of the new engineers beside me turned her head slightly. "Didn't you design that system?" she whispered. I nodded once, eyes still on the screen. Later that night, back at my desk, I opened a private folder I hadn't touched in months. Archived me private. Inside were annotated diagrams, voice memos, version logs, and sketches. Dating back years, all of it timestamped, archived, and backed up. I clicked on a recording from 2:12 a.m. the night I had fixed the peak load failure, my voice tired but clear, resolved. Energy handoff lag by rebuilding the convergence. Logic will test against new load simulation at 7 a.m. Closed the file. It wasn't just that he'd stolen credit, was that he had rewritten the past so confidently, so completely. I started questioning if I had ever mattered before leaving. I opened the MIT offer email, still there, buried in a folder titled "What If?" Then I read the message I'd sent 6 years ago. "I believe the work I'm doing here is just as important." I closed my laptop, hands steady now. I had believed in him, but I wouldn't make that mistake again. He hadn't just lied to investors. He'd done it so confidently, so thoroughly, it made me doubt my own memory. Back at my apartment, I sat on the couch in the dark, laptop on my knees. The city outside buzzed with a soft, forgettable rhythm, but inside my head was Thursdaying with things I'd let slide for too long. I clicked open a folder I hadn't touched since before the holiday break. Archive me private. I had created it as a safety net, telling myself it was for version control and personal learning, but the truth, I kept those files because something in me always knew no one else would. Remember, the screen lit up with dozens of subfolders, design blueprints, algorithm versions, deployment notes, emails, voice memos. I opened the earliest one, dated from 5.5 years ago. The file name read Adaptive Routing VO, Initial Thoughts, TXT. In it, I'd written a note to myself, concept sketch, decentralized load balancing via feedback loop. Landon says it's too complex, prove him wrong. I kept clicking versions marked by date, time, and detail. Each file was carefully labeled most included. Internal emails I had sent to Landon with technical explanations, proposals, or architecture diagrams, and I had the receipts. Timestamps, draft versions, attached visuals, all of it. I opened one voice memo from 2:30 a.m. on a stormy Thursday. My own voice echoed through the speakers, weary but focused. Testing cross redundancy, energy drop detected, will rebuild predictive loop. Deployment scheduled for 7 a.m. I paused. That fix had saved the entire western region's test bed from collapsing under heat surge demand. Landon had sent out a company-wide email later that day congratulating the team, but no one ever asked who'd stayed behind to build the fix. No one knew, except him. I scrolled further until I noticed an unread email sitting in my inbox, timestamped 8:46 p.m. marked high priority. It was from one of the executive assistants. I vaguely remembered Sasha, something, subject line review copy, do not distribute attachment, the mind behind Voltron draft, V3 PDF. My stomach turned. I wasn't supposed to be on that list. Curious, I opened the file. A sleek modern cover appeared on my screen below the title, by Landon Crane. The preface began from sketching systems by hand to launching the most sophisticated optimization models in the industry. This is the story of how I engineered the future. I scrolled, breath-tightening. Chapter to the night I rebuilt the routing core. Chapter 5, 18 months of silence. My journey through the model that changed everything. My hands hovered over the trackpad. I scanned paragraph after paragraph, and it was unmistakable. He was describing my work, my algorithms, my breakthroughs, the specific phrasing, the flow logic, the bottlenecks I had solved at 2:12 a.m. while eating cold pretzels at my desk. There was even a graphic copied directly from a whiteboard photo I had emailed him during our first optimization round. He hadn't just erased me, he had repackaged me. I closed the document slowly and stared at the screen, chest hollow and buzzing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't about credit lost in a group effort. It was a calculated rewrite, a professional identity theft, wrapped in glossy self-promotion. He was writing a book about his genius, built on the scaffolding of my labor, and he had every intention of publishing it before the world ever knew who I was. I reopened the archive folder and created a new directory. Evidence level 1. I started copying files, voice memos, email threads, graphs, even the internal project nicknames only I'd kept it all, silently, faithfully, like a ghost documenting her own haunting, but no more. I pulled out my notebook and flipped to the back. Tucked between the last 2 pages was an old business card, matte black, silver foil. The name stood out like a memory. I hadn't dared act on Dr. Lenora Clean, CTO, Helidyne Innovations. She had approached me once 3 years ago, quietly, During a conference break when you're ready to work somewhere that actually understands what you do, she'd said, call me. That night I composed a message subject, still interested body. You once asked about the mind behind the algorithm. If the offer still stands, I'd like to talk. I hovered a moment, then clicked send. Landon was writing a myth I was about to start. The chapter where it all falls apart. I sent the email expecting a polite decline. What I got instead was an invitation, same day, no hesitation. Lenora Klein replied, just before 7:15 a.m. The message was brief and precise. Let's talk. 11 a.m. Private conference room, Heliodyne HQ. By 10:40 a.m., I was standing in front of the sleek brushed steel doors of Heliodyne Innovations. Unlike Voltrian's lobby, full of marble awards and polished portraits, this place was built around silence, code, and quiet brilliance. The kind of space where ideas mattered more than optics. The receptionist gave me a visitor badge without small talk and motioned me to a side hallway. Lenora was waiting just outside a glass-walled conference room, dressed in a dark blazer. No jewelry, hair pulled back tight. She didn't smile, didn't posture. Just nodded. Once you came fast, she said. I've been quiet for too long, I replied. She held the door for me, then closed it behind us. No assistants, no distractions, just two women in a room that felt refreshingly absent of pretense. Lenora didn't ask for a recap, she didn't need one. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up a single file. Before she clicked play, she said, I remember the way you diagrammed that routing core. You didn't just write code, you rewired how this industry thinks. Her words caught me off guard, not because they were flattering, but because they felt like the truth. No translation, no caveat. I slid a small USB drive across the table, voice logs, diagrams, code iterations, email threads, all time-stamped. She plugged it in without ceremony. For the next several minutes, she read, clicked, and scrolled, quiet, focused, methodical. When she finally looked up, she said, You've got everything you need to challenge the patents. I nodded. I didn't build this archive because I expected to use it, I built it because I knew no one else would. Lenora leaned back slightly, then said something that changed everything. I want to show you something. She opened a new file, a PowerPoint slide deck with a Voltrian header. The title page read Vesta. Q for launch plan, below it confidential internal. Only. I frowned. She clicked a slide. For it was a schematic of an advanced routing model, multi-layered, adaptive, regionally scaled, and it was mine. Not inspired by mine, not similar. Mine 3 years ago? I'd built that model in my own time in a side notebook I'd never submitted. I hadn't even finished stress testing it. They're preparing to launch it this fall, Lenora said. Someone inside sent this to me last night. For a moment, I didn't breathe. They weren't just stealing my past, I said quietly. They were preparing to steal my future. Lenora didn't flinch. Then maybe it's time you take it back. She paused, then offered the one thing no one at Voltrian had ever given me. Come to Heliodyne. Full authority. Build your system the way it was meant to work, and when you're ready, my legal team will help you burn down every lie they've built for the first time in 12 years. I didn't feel like I had to fight to prove I mattered. I looked her in the eye and said yes. The alliance had begun. After I said yes to Lenora, I thought the next call would be one of strategy. Instead, it was a cease and desist. The email came through at 9 a.m. Less than 24 hours after I'd accepted the offer from Heliodyne. The subject line screamed in all caps, immediate legal notice, unauthorized disclosure of proprietary systems. I didn't flinch. I clicked it open, sipped my coffee, and read each line. Slowly, Voltrian's legal department, apparently outraged, was accusing me of stealing confidential IP and misrepresenting ownership of proprietary routing frameworks. There was something almost comical about the tone, like someone trying very hard to sound powerful from a position of panic. It was long, bloated with legal jargon, and made vague threats about consequences if I continued to leverage or display any derivative works developed within Voltrian systems. I leaned back, opened a second window, and pulled up a familiar PDF, Internal Policy Handbook. Reverenders 2020 Section 7. 3. Intellectual ownership of development. Archives. I'd written that policy myself 3 years ago during a messy internal audit. At the time, the company wanted to clean up documentation practices, and I had fought hard to include a clause protecting non-billable self-directed innovation. It had been signed without question by Landon Crane. I composed a reply. Please refer to Section 7. 3 of the Internal Policy Handbook, documentation and systems created by employees during non-billable research or self-directed innovation shall remain their intellectual property unless a separate agreement has been signed. You signed this clause on March 4, 2020. No further clarification needed. I attached a screenshot of the policy and the signature page. No emotional language, no need. At 10:20 a. I received a Slack ping from Lenora, got the notice to Voltrian's flailing, legal. Team's not impressed, we're drafting a response, she added a smile emoji, just one. By 2:30 p.m., I was reviewing design files in my temporary workspace when another message came in. This one was unexpected, unmarked number, no subject, no greeting, just one sentence. They're trying to bury this, but you have a case, check the version logs from Q2 last year below, that an email signature. Jason P. Internal Counsel Voltrian. Systems former. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake, I simply sat up straighter and opened my backup drive in a folder titled Code Logs. I found it proof of authorship, a commit record from 10/21 a.m., April 17, timestamped under my personal credentials, attaching the routing core schematic. Voltrian was now trying to claim as theirs Jason had been part of the policy team when Section 7.3 was drafted, he knew exactly what was in it, and now he was telling me they were altering internal logs to overwrite my name. They couldn't beat me with facts. I thought so. Now they're rewriting history. I forwarded the file to Lenora with a short note. We have confirmation time to act, she responded. Within 5 minutes, we move tomorrow. You're not alone. I closed my laptop, folded my hands, and stared out the window at the late afternoon skyline. The sun was lower. Now shadows stretching longer, but I'd never seen things so clearly. They wanted a quiet exit, but I wasn't leaving quietly anymore. It didn't take long. 6 days after the cease and desist, the first cracks appeared. I was reviewing architecture diagrams for Heliodine's new adaptive model when a message came through from an unlisted number. It was a screenshot, low resolution, cropped in haste, but I knew what I was looking at immediately. A Voltrian control panel red text blinked at the top. Error demand forecast inconsistent with regional load balancer output, timestamp 8:58 a.m., system region to Midwest Energy Corridor, no sender, no explanation, just the image. I stared at it for a moment, then smiled. Faintly. They'd started to lose the thread. At first I thought it was a fluke, a reporting lag. But by 10 a.m., 2 more screenshots came in, this time with attached performance logs. The patterns were clear. Predicted demand curves no longer aligned with actual usage. Load balancing fell behind, failing to adapt to the new solar surge windows and nightly urban consumption drop offs. In simple terms, the system was guessing and guessing wrong. That afternoon I heard from someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Jonas, a back-end engineer, still clinging to Voltrian's middle tier. He didn't say much, just one line. Marin, were you the one who built the heartbeat module? I blinked. Heartbeat? That's what they were calling it because it's missing. I sat up straighter. Missing wasn't something you said lightly in an operational dashboard. Modules might misfire, get overwritten, glitch during a push, but missing. I asked for a screenshot. Jonas hesitated, then sent it. The error was even more specific, this time, fatal error, missing core logic module, MH Hollis opt V39. There it was, my name still in the code, still alive 3 years ago. I'd added that tag as a quiet joke. MH Hollis opt stood for Marin Hollis Optimization version 3.9, the stable build of the dynamic load prediction model I'd created after 6 months of trial and error. It had been tucked deep in the system, hidden behind layers of abstraction and renaming conventions, but it was the engine, the silent heartbeat, that allowed the entire predictive routing framework to run ahead of demand curves, not behind them. They had scrubbed my name from documentation, rewrote internal credits, rebranded functions, but they never touched the core because they never understood it. I remembered the night I finalized version 3. Nuevelas dos y doceato. Raining outside. I'd been alone in the office, eating trail mix.